All right, we are recording. Hello, welcome. And I'm going to send through the chat a link to where you can find the workbook. So if you open up the chat, it should have just flashed at you. Open up the chat, click on that link, and that will take you over here to this page so you can see the workbook and you can follow along. All right, so since we're starting on time, we'll probably have several people trickling in a little late, but we'll let them get away with it. So let's double check we are recording and we have the link. So let's get started. First off, thank you for coming. I know it's kind of popular right now in social culture to be average, to be mediocre, and to feel bad about yourself for wanting more than what you currently have. But I think that way lies death and bad things for our society. So I am grateful that you are consciously looking for things to make your life better. I think when you do that, the whole world benefits. So let's get started. This is for professionals who are tired of being overlooked, ignored, or underestimated. You already know there's something more that you want, more that you could be. And today we're going to talk about what that is. So first off, a lot of people wonder, what even is charisma? I know it's kind of a catchphrase, you've heard it, you might have heard it by presence, executive presence, charm, polish. When I was working with recruiters who were dealing a lot with job interviews and polishing candidates up for interviews, they said a lot of employers are looking for that indefinable polish that just makes someone seem a little bit better. But that's often hard to explain, and it's hard to recognize. But the reason that is because it's nonverbal, and most people have no idea what nonverbal communication is or why it matters. But that is actually the secret of charisma. It's almost entirely nonverbal. So people might say charisma is compelling attractiveness or charm that can inspire devotion in others, or giving delight, arousing admiration. But in reality, charisma is a set of people skills that allow you to send the right nonverbal messages to change what people think of you, and enable you to read the intentions and emotions of others so you can react accordingly. And usually you're able to read those intentions and emotions before they even know what they're feeling, because there actually is a several second delay between feeling an emotion and recognizing that you're feeling an emotion. And so that several second delay is where charismatic people know when to target and know when to switch around the situation before something bad happens. All right, so what we're here to do today is to work on your charisma to help you make a really good impression. So there is a myth that charisma is a genetic jackpot that only a few special snowflakes are born with. And those special snowflakes go on to become actors or politicians or leaders or speakers, whatever. But the reality is, charisma is a collection of communication skills that can be observed, they can be mimicked, they can be taught, and they can be mastered. Charisma is a learnable skill, and there are 4 exact ingredients that make up charisma. So at this point, I want to let you know that if you have questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. I have you muted so that if you have to get around or if your dog starts barking or whatever, it doesn't bother the rest of the attendees. But if you have a question, nothing would make me happier than if you were to post it in the group chat, because I know these workshops, they're so much more fun when there's one-on-one interactions. So if anything crosses your mind, even if you're afraid it's a stupid question, go ahead and post it in the chat. I would love to talk with you. All right, so let's go into the charisma ingredients. Now, the first 2 ingredients are skills that you use right away when you meet someone. This is how you make that first impression. And the trick about first impressions that I had to learn the hard way growing up is that once you make an impression, it is very, very, very difficult to change it. And so if you make an excellent first impression, people will help you live up to that impression because they assume you're this awesome person. And so even if you occasionally fall short, they will make up the gap in their own minds. They'll make excuses for you. Whereas, on the other hand, say you make a really, really bad first impression. That happens sometimes. And that means you've set the standard down here. So if you come back later and you do something awesome, it's too late. It's too bad. They will make you live down to that first impression. And that's why it is so important to make the best first impression you can as often as you can. All right, for everybody joining us right now, just a brief recap, we are talking about charisma. And if you want to follow along in the workbook, which I recommend, if you check out the chat, there should be a link. You just click on that link, it will open up a workbook for you. And by the way, if you have questions at any time about anything, please post them in the chat because I would love to talk with you. All right, so the first two charisma ingredients are what we use to make a first impression. And if you've ever in the past been ignored, overlooked, forgotten, or avoided, excluded, that's because you made a certain first impression. And on the other hand, if you've ever been set above the competition, if you've ever been immediately treated with respect, appreciation, deference, that's because you made a really good first impression. So the first impression, it's really half of the battle right there, is those first few seconds when someone makes up their mind about you. And if you can win them over in those first few seconds, you don't have to work nearly as hard for the rest of that relationship. But if in those first few seconds you set the bar down here, you will have to work 10, 20, 100 times harder in order to get them to think better of you. All right, we've got a good question here from Nate. So how effective is changing one's perception of you after they've known you for years and they've established a negative impression? Now this is tricky. And I've seen this a lot. I've had some clients who say, yeah, they came to me for professional work, but there are things going on at home that are causing them problems. And what often happens as soon as you set up a first impression is that people stop seeing you and they start seeing the mask that you wear. So instead of people seeing your face, they just see this thing that instead of people seeing your personality, for example, they see this thing they think is your personality. And so when you say something, they don't actually hear what you said, they hear what they assume about what you said. And if your voice tone, if you've been in a negative relationship and their voice tone says something even the slightest bit questionable, and there's a thing in their question that's even the slightest bit offensive, you hear the offense and you go on the defense or you go on the offense. And so that's because they've developed a mask of assumptions that aren't necessarily true. And so the way to change that is actually to take these exact skills we're going to be talking about today, and you just have to use them as much as you can, as often as you can, for as long as you can. And I've seen this happen in my marriage. I've seen it happen in a lot of different relationships with my clients, where people have gotten into a habit of how they interact with each other. And so you have this little role play that you do whenever you interact with this person. They say something and you assume something about it. You say something and they assume something about it. And neither of you ever sees behind the mask